From the moment I graduated Harvard Law School in the late 1980s, my path was clear. I could have chosen a lucrative job, but my conscience urged me to Montgomery, Alabama, where the legacy of systematic bias haunted every aspect of the legal system. I felt an obligation, a calling, to defend those condemned not by truth, but by a corrupt process. The foundation of my mission became the Equal Justice Initiative, conceived to protect poor prisoners who were not only outmatched in court, but also forgotten by society. Upon my arrival in the South, I was sharply confronted with the reality of racial prejudice perpetuated over generations, creating a climate where the guilty and the innocent were indistinguishable to those holding power. My first steps involved visiting death row inmates. In that oppressive setting, behind concrete and steel, I met people whose lives had been reduced to case files. There I encountered Walter "Johnny D." McMillian, a man whose presence radiated a quiet conviction of innocence, burdened by years of undeserved suffering. Walter had been convicted for the murder of a young woman named Rhonda Morrison, yet as I listened to his recounting, he adamantly insisted on his innocence, not only to me, but to anyone willing to listen. He was sentenced to death based solely on the testimony of Ralph Myers, a convicted felon whose statements I later discovered were fraught with contradiction. From the outset, Walter's case was riddled with gaps. Witnesses who could have given him an alibi were ignored, and no physical evidence ever connected him to the crime. Instead, the prosecution's entire narrative rested on Myers' dubious claim, offered in exchange for leniency in his own legal troubles. The unfairness was glaring. I recognized that the system had simply needed someone to blame, and Walter, a black man in a small town deeply influenced by prejudice, was a convenient choice. Determined to expose the truth, I delved into the case files. At every turn, barriers emerged. Polite refusals, outright hostility, and even threats from local law enforcement. The authorities resisted transparency, and soon it was clear that the forces arrayed against us would do anything to maintain the status quo. My team at Equal Justice Initiative included Eva Ansley, who worked with equal vigor to establish our foothold, despite the mounting pressure. Together, we uncovered that Myers, the key witness, was forced to testify under threat. Police had aggressively coerced him, presenting the choice of cooperation or severe criminal penalty. When I brought new evidence to the state prosecutor, Tommy Chapman, my arguments were dismissed without consideration. Still, I persisted. I found that at the exact moment of the crime, Walter was among a circle of friends and community members, people willing to testify, if not for genuine fear. The climate of intimidation among the witnesses was palpable. Those who dared to speak in Walter's defense found themselves at risk, some facing retaliatory charges. Even as I pushed for transparency in the courts, my own safety was not guaranteed. On one occasion, sheriff's deputies stopped my car, their conduct fueled not by law, but by animosity. They searched and detained me, making it clear that their authority would not be questioned without a price. The struggle for justice was not limited to Walter's ordeal. Another case, Herbert Richardson's, demonstrated the system's callousness. Herbert was a troubled Vietnam veteran, sentenced to death with scant regard for his mental trauma or mitigating circumstances. I could not alter the outcome of Herbert's case, and his execution left a deep mark on me, highlighting the scale of the injustice faced by so many. Witnessing the finality of his sentence renewed my determination to fight at all costs for those still waiting, especially Walter. My next step involved directly confronting Myers, whose guilt was written across his face. Alone and away from the prying eyes of the authorities, I spoke with him. The emotional walls he'd built over years crumbled, and he admitted what I'd suspected. He had lied under immense pressure. Together, we prepared for him to recant his story in open court, hoping that at last, truth would eclipse convenience. The courtroom, however, was not a sanctuary for fairness. Despite Myers' new testimony, the judge denied a retrial. The legal machinery, mired in bureaucracy, seemed engineered to resist change. Facing public indifference or quiet hostility, we needed a broader audience. I reached out to the media, appearing on a widely watched news program to build public support for Walter's cause. With renewed scrutiny, the Supreme Court of Alabama was compelled to overturn the local court's ruling, paving the way for a new trial. With public opinion shifting, I pressed Chapman, seeking his partnership in righting a historic wrong. He was unreceptive, his allegiance bound to the prevailing order. I presented the overwhelming evidence in front of the judge and waited. On the final day, Chapman unexpectedly joined me, finally aligning for truth. The motion passed, and the judge dismissed all charges, setting Walter free at last after 6 years on death row for a crime he did not and could not have committed. Walter's reunion with his family was both an ending and a beginning. One chapter closed, but the scars of injustice remained. The relief of freedom was bittersweet, for nothing could restore lost time or erase the trauma endured. In the aftermath, statistics from our work revealed a grim reality. For every 9 sentences carried out, 1 person is later found innocent. Our victory exposed not a flaw, but the essence of a system in dire need of reform. Walter and I remained connected long after his release, bonded by a purpose born in adversity. His spirit, undimmed by hardship, reminded me always of the human cost of injustice. Though he passed away years later from natural causes, the legacy of his case endures. He was one of the first to walk free because of the Equal Justice Initiative. Our fight had given hope to many condemned without a voice. My work did not end with Walter's case. Other men like Anthony Ray Hinton, Walter's former cellmate, languished for decades on death row due to equally flawed evidence. By pushing for transparency and fairness, I was able to secure his release years later. Each case is a reminder that real justice cannot thrive in an environment shaped by bias and fear. Throughout my journey, the emotional toll was immense. The threats, the resistance, and the heartbreaks weighed heavily. But moments of triumph, like seeing Walter step out of prison into sunlight, validated our struggle. The pain and loss suffered by those wrongfully accused and their families became my greatest motivators, fueling a tireless pursuit of equality and human dignity. Every case, every hearing, every setback reaffirmed that my fight was as much about changing lives as altering the very fabric of justice in America. The story of Walter McMillian is no isolated tragedy. It encapsulates the experience of countless others lost within the system. Since the foundation of the Equal Justice Initiative, victories like his have illuminated a path toward hope. We have continued to fight, not only for individuals, but also for broader change in law, policy, and public consciousness. The release of Walter and others drew attention to the persistent legacy of injustice and set a new standard for what the law could and should uphold. Luta por Justiça is more than a retelling of events. It is a testament to resilience, compassion, and the power of persistent advocacy. The individuals we defended were not merely names in a casebook. They were people whose humanity shone through years of darkness. My journey, shaped by these encounters, reaffirmed my faith in the possibility of a better, fairer world. Every setback, threat, and late night spent preparing for court was fueled by the unwavering belief that justice, real justice, must be available to all. The road was long, littered with defeat and disappointment, but each moment was one step closer to the light. As I reflect, I am filled with gratitude for those who stood with me, my team, the families, and the communities that embraced the pursuit of truth against overwhelming odds. Even after all this time, the lessons remain. Injustice thrives in silence and indifference, but perseverance and courage can bend the arc toward justice. The battle continues, and every life vindicated is a testament to the cause. This is not just my story or Walter's, but the story of all who dare to hope, even when hope seems out of reach.